welcome. Thank you so much for coming along this evening. My name is Simon Armitage. It's written down here in my notes. I'm very clear about that. And it's been my great privilege to be the curator and host of the Poetic strand of the Ripples of Hope Festival. And tonight is our Friday night declaration. Essentially, around 30 poets have been invited to write a newly commissioned piece based on one of the 30 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And tonight we're going to hear and see 8 of those. 8 world premieres in one night. Yeah. Plus poems from our guest of honor, Linton Kwesi Johnson. Linton didn't know I was going to describe him as our guest of honor, but he's our guest, and we're honored to have him, so let that be his title. I'd also like to introduce and to thank our house musician, Jadev Mistry, who's been playing us in and will be playing us out. So let's give him a hand of applause. He's disappeared. I'll introduce the poets now and again when they read. Sjon and Tishani Doshi are attending by virtue of technological wizardry because of our old enemy COVID. But those with us as real people in person, perhaps you'd like to give a little wave when your name is called out, are Imtiaz Dharker, Mona Arshi, Raymond Antrobus, Malika Booker, McCarthy, Glyn Maxwell, and the aforementioned Linton Quesi Johnson. Our warm-up poet for the evening is Simon Armitage. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'll get my poem out of the way so we can get on with the business of the newly minted poems. I think the poem I'm about to read touches on several articles, but the right to privacy, Article 12, is what concerns me most here. I worked as a probation officer in Manchester in the late 80s and early 90s, and as part of that career path, spent a time in Wakefield Prison in Wakefield, West Yorkshire. Wakefield Prison is a Category A prison, known locally and very cruelly as the Monster Mansion. And there are people serving multiple life sentences in there. And during my induction period there, I was taken down to a basement area in the prison to be shown, I think that's the right phrase, to be shown a prisoner called Robert Maudsley, who was kept in a glass case, a prison cell with glass walls and just some very rudimentary furniture. So he was looked in on the whole time. So as I say, that was the late 80s. And then a few years ago, I was driving around in my car and listening to the radio, and there's a report about long-term prisoners, and they happened to mention that Robert Maudsley was still there in that same place so many years later. And I couldn't quite process the idea that in all that time, all the life that I'd lived, he was still sitting there in that same situation. I suppose my point is that if you create something called society and you decide to exclude people from it, my feeling is that you've still got to treat them with some kind of respect during that exclusion time. The poem is called Solitary, and it's a villanelle. And if you know your poems, you'll know that's a kind of poem that loops back on itself in a very claustrophobic way. I think of Robert Maudsley in his glass case, on his cardboard chair next to his concrete bed. Like a blind man hearing a mouse, his blank face half turned towards me, then stared into space. A cardboard plate offered a slice of concrete bread. I think of Robert Maudsley in his glass case, Given half a chance, he'll spoon out your brains through your ears and eat them raw, the warden said of the bland, mousy man with the blank face. All day, platform announcements at Wakefield chase along prison landings, down stone steps, into the ears of Robert Maudsley in his glass case. All night, freight trains and sleeper trains crawl through a man's mind as he sits and reflects. Like a blind mouse hearing a man, my face half turns towards Wakefield when the radio says he's still there, locked in his head. I think of Robert Maudsley in his glass case, his blank face looking back at his blank face. So each poet will introduce their poem and perhaps say something about the article they've chosen to write about. So please welcome, first up, Imtiaz Dharker.
Thank you, Simon. I chose Article 1 because it's the one article that speaks about the human qualities that, in the face of everything that's happening, can still give hope. It says we are endowed with reason and conscience. That seemed like an important one to me, and so I took that because I think none of the other articles actually say what we are, what it is that can change things. Everywhere, this very first article of human rights is being ignored. Leaders are willfully choosing to bypass reason and conscience. They make their excuses in language that has been corrupted and words that have been devalued. And in the poem I wrote, I've used a kind of bureaucratic word, a word of false excuses, however. And I've tried to turn it around and suggest the human will to survive and the human breath that survives. In the face of everything, the news, the noise, the toxic opinion masquerading as fact. Poetry listens to the voices that have been silenced, and it pays close attention, not just to the words that are said, but who is saying them and why. However, she buried the book under the peach tree, but it would not stay put. First a scribbled shoot, then the stalks appeared and spelt out the name of their God in upright strokes that made it clear what she had hidden. It sprouted the telltale script of their language. The garden was humming with what she planted among the mint leaves that flavored her fingers and clung to her hands. Whatever she did, she is gone to learn a new script. The phone rings in a hollowed house, but whoever it is at the other end of the line gives up and the ringing stops. The peaches drop with the sound of soft bodies. Whoever was taken was due to be processed. Whatever was said or implied, the lie was retracted, the question redirected. There is nothing to see here but a woman reading, nothing to hear but her finger moving on paper, no harm intended. However, it is true the body is broken. However, the eyes are live. The tongue remembers the hint of cumin, peach juice splashed down the chin, the taste of a life before barbed womb, barred door, bared teeth in the jaws of power. However, the breath is butterfly.
Thank you so much, Imtiaz. I'm now going to introduce the Icelandic poet and novelist and short story writer Sjon, who's coming to us in a glitter of electrically charged pixels on your screen here. Sjon has written about Article 2, the right not to be discriminated against, and his poem, he may well say all this for himself, It's called Measuring the Shadow.
Measuring the shadow. Should you fortify your citadel so heavily that the beetle known as blacksmith in certain barbaric languages of the north can't find a crack in it, a stranger will be born in your midst. Anonymous. On the day it showed up, the sky was clear, is all I can say. By then, they had already lost the seasons. It appeared in the market square, a mere dot on the pavestones left of the herb stalls. None of the women folk had been pregnant. The chemist's Athanor was still being rebuilt after the last explosion. A homunculus hadn't sprung from there. Nothing had pierced the glass dome. At first it was mistaken for a pool of drying blood, until it moved on its own accord, a shadow without a body, crawling with leisure at the speed of an evening star. It only got as far as the temple ruins before it was captured, arrested and put under guard. After deliberation, they gave it the sundial test to see if it was of their species or not. Gathered in the amphitheater, young and old, inspected the alien blot in its center. From dawn to night, they saw it change shape, and then again the day after. Sun and moon worked their magic, teasing a body from its formlessness, showing a head where a head should be. And on an afternoon in the 3rd month, it grew arms and legs, though not perfect and somewhat skewed. Laughter was heard coming from the crowd. A joker shouted, "Uncle Carlos!" And they all joined in with their own comparisons. By then, it had started to measure right against the shadows of humans, for that is what they call themselves. I must stop here. A voice comes from inside the house. Supper's ready. Where are you, little blacksmith?
Thank you, Sjon. I'm saying thank you to you from here. What is thank you in Icelandic? Tak? Tak. And he's saying you're welcome from wherever he is. Please welcome to the stage Mona Arshi.
Thank you so much. So good to be here. I'm responding to what's known as sort of the fundamental rights, Articles 3, 4 and 5, which relate to right to life and the right not to be enslaved, and also the right to be free of torture. But specifically, I'm responding to an event in 2014 where over 6,000 Yazidi women were abducted and enslaved. Many of those girls are still unaccounted for. Mute mountains. In the skies over Mosul, the poem twitches into being. It flickers its orange tail, flames, echoes in the valleys. The valleys will absorb the aftersound. Here are the compound eyes in the heads of the poppies. Here is a girl who refuses to look into the wind. Now she is bone breath and ashes. This is where the poem begins. The fringes of the poem dare to lie back across the dust in straight lines. What can a poem do, Suyaman, when it meets the so-what bird of the mountains, that bird that will only drink water on the wing? This poem has such tender hooves, but it cannot follow you into the tent, into the pockets of men. It cannot touch your hair, because it rests now on its receiver. Perhaps you still remember the stories, those women who streamed past, holding beads and ancient skillets, their wise mouths uncovered. In the thirst-filled days, they refused groundwater. They whisper to us like ephemeral sisters through the unerasable mountains. I'm going to read one more poem, which is responding to also an event. It's about an honour killing. It's based on the murder of Shafilia Ahmed, who was murdered by her parents in 2002. Her body was dumped in the River Kent, and her parents were later convicted of her murder, and it's voiced by Shafilia and her mother. Ballad of the Small-Boned Daughter. I've woken in this fearful flood. I've woken in the water. Oh, mother, did you put me here, your firstborn only daughter? And can it be the fishes here are nibbling at my flesh? And can it be the sun I see that faces me in death? You are as beautiful, my Jon, as the word or tears I'll shed, as she warmed the blade against her cheek, fine as silken thread. She disarmed her tongue with one fine stroke, father held her down. Then a glove fist sealed her in and dropped her in to drown. At first the light protested, strained to touch her face, yet she died again in the waters like a disappearing voice. For 6 long months she lay like this, whilst the air pulsed with life. Then in February they found her under a rippling rod of ice. The mourners came to pay respects. The mother wailed in white. The mother had rehearsed sadness in the mirror all through the night. Sometimes her daughter came to her in snow or quiet weather. She avoided the ghost who smelt like her small-boned baby daughter. She couldn't ignore flakes of skin and hair filling up her bed. Nightly she lifted the black strands and went to sleep and bled. Unwieldy daughter, let me be, she cried with a voice of wire. You despised all filial duty. It's the devil you admire. One day when the grieving mother was blowing on her tea, they came for her and the father and asked them how they'd plead. We know not how she met her fate, how she claimed her watery bed. The only crime we're guilty of was not to see her wed. Screens showed the trial in detail. We followed every note. We learnt about her bloody death, how they practiced knots in rope. And yes, the parents were found guilty, for this was a tale of sin. But who grieves for this girl of 17, if not her kith and kin? Sometimes, on a September path, when you're near or hear the water, press your minds to the open sky. Think of the small-boned daughter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mona. Please welcome Raymond Antrobus.
The rebellious. The rebellious hold what they can in front of a supermarket or police stations or voting booths. I am kind to the man sitting next to me in C.L.R. James Library, even if his breathing disturbs me. Can we graciously disagree? I am tired of people not knowing the volume of their power. Who doesn't deserve some silence at night? The article I've chosen to respond to is Article 5 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. And a couple of years ago, a friend of mine who I'd gone to school with had committed suicide in his jail cell. He was deaf, and his hearing aids were taken from him, and they were never returned to him despite pleading for them back. He was on a wing where no one spoke this language, sign language, and he was completely isolated. None of the prisoners, none of the wardens had any kind of deaf awareness. So there's already a triple isolation on him. And when I heard about what happened to him, I didn't know how I would ever write about that. But this commission invited me into that, to give volume to his story. Also, my pandemic reading has been all James Baldwin. I haven't read all of James Baldwin's novels, but I act like I have. So let me fix that. So James Baldwin appears in this poem as well with a number of his characters. And I started to notice how many characters in Baldwin's novels commit suicide. For Tyrone Givens, the paper said putting him in jail without his hearing aids was like putting him in a hole in the ground. There are no hymns for deaf boys, but who can tell we're deaf without speaking to us? Tyrone's name was misspelled in the HMP Pentonville prison system. Once, I was handcuffed, shoved into a police van. I didn't hear the officer say why. I was saved by my friend's mother, who threw herself in the road and refused to let the van drive away. Who could have saved Tyrone? James Baldwin attempted suicide after each of his loves jumped from bridges or overdosed. He killed his characters, made them kill themselves. Rufus, Richard, black men who couldn't live like this. Tyrone, I won writing awards, bought new hearing aids, and heard my name through the walls. I bought a signed Baldwin book. The man who sold it to me didn't know you, me, or Baldwin. I feel I rescued it. I feel failed. Tyrone, the last time I saw you alive, I dropped my pen on the staircase. Didn't hear it fall, but you saw I ran down to get it. Handed it to me, said, you might need this.
Thank you very much, Raymond. We're now joined virtually by Tishani Doshi. Tishani's chosen to write about Article 6, that our rights are respected before the law, and she'll be reading her poem, I See You, Do You See Me?
I see you. Do you see me? Once I was a boy in a frock. Once I was a girl struggling to climb out of a pool. I met myself at a seaside holiday. Remember that moment in childhood when you were innocent and then you were not. Remember what it was to look at the world after, how the doorway shifts and you deposit both selves in a lost and found box. The relief of discovery, of disappearing. You see me, don't you? I'm the one hanging photographs in a dark room, archiving the forest of myself. There's a gap between us the size of a sphinx. In this feathery winter light, the doorway shifts again. The aerial prints of my life expose all the secrets I wanted to hide. If this were a play, we'd be getting to the point where you recognize me and I recognize you. All the masks slip and everything is remade. Father killed, mother married. But listen, this is not Aristotelian tragedy. Let's not end in a bloodbath. We could return to the kingdom triumphant instead. After so many years of being lost, we could be twins with identical birthmarks, climb off the boat and leave our vests on the shore, make mud images of ourselves and return them to the sea, the way idols are immersed and sent home after a stay with devotees. There is always the promise of a night sky, the what you are twinkle of a billion stars and surveillance cameras, a dizzying pixelated universe, our biometric futures miniaturized on a grain of sand. What could be so difficult about saying, I see you, I see you, I see you? So I chose Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the article reads, everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. The reason I wanted to write about this topic is because of the word recognition, which comes from the Latin conoscere, to know again, and it implies that we are re-meeting and re-seeing things, so not for the first time. I was just thinking in general about the politics of seeing, what it means to see, what it means to be the observer or to be the observed, the many gaps that we have in our individual selves that we are constantly trying to understand, and then the difficulty then in seeing one another and what that might be. I also read that in 2021 there are going to be 1 billion surveillance cameras, so that's one camera for every 7 people on the planet. And I think as we go increasingly into an age of surveillance and issues of privacy, issues of states controlling things in terms of information, in terms of news, in terms of our private information, I'm thinking, what then does seeing mean in that context, and how do we hold on to ourselves and see the humanity in each other? And so I think my mind was spinning with all those questions when I began this poem.
Thank you, Tishani. At roughly the halfway point in proceedings, I'll just mention the little-known Article 31, which is the right of everybody to buy books of poetry. And we've chosen to honour that right by offering those books of poetry outside. So if you wanted to avail yourself of that opportunity, it's there. Please welcome to the microphone, to the lectern, Malika Booker.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I chose Article 9. No one can be placed in prison and left there without good reason. I chose to write a poem called Museums for Mothers of Black Bodies Murdered in State Custody. And I chose to write it because I'm struck by how scared as people of color I am to be stopped by the police, and doubly so Black men to be stopped by the police, and also in honor of my cousin Sjon Charles, who was killed in a shop, sweet shop in Dalston on the 22nd of July, 2017. And in that same time, another young man, Edson DeCosta, was also lynched by police. I write this to honor my family, and I write for all the women who appear in front of microphones, silent, with lawyers speaking for them for a bit of a second in the spotlight, and then they disappear. So I wanted to create a museum for them, a museum for their grief, a museum for their space. I'm going to read an excerpt of the poem. Exhibit 4, definitions of what kind of mothering is it if one must always be prepared with knowledge of the possibility of the violent and quotation death of one's child? From In on Blackness and Being, Christiana Sharp. Since the news, her sluggish bones held it all in, did not bawl, and the weight piled up bent her back until her heart breaks down. 1 minute chopping onions, the next laid out on a bed, incessant bleeping, tubes attached to her arms. How do you warn your boy child at the shop counter, local sweet shops also kills? Son, you can die buying a pack of cigarettes and chocolate. Clots of mud bouncing onto the coffin, ripped a guttural bass tone that rippled her belly and raised paws. This was like birthing him 20 years ago. How useless her warnings, to look both ways when crossing the road, drive within the street limit. She had not warned him what to do, black man in a sweet shop, thrown down onto the floor, arms unhandcuffed, a white man's brute body on top of his body. As she remembers, her inadequacies press palms onto belly, pushing air through. Her body is now a hot air balloon, gut-sucked. She sways to Sister Mabel's tambourine claps. Exhibit 5, Hauntology of Wreckages. I ask you, what does it look like to defend the dead in the wake on Blackness and Being, Christiana Sharp? 7 wasps litter her floorboards. It is always autumn now, and wasp knows something important died from this house. More wasps arrive in swarms to die too. Bodies besmirch her parquet floorboards with death. Note, wasps have an unwarranted reputation for being aggressive. They are gentle creatures unless provoked. Exhibit 6, Spectacle of Spacious Silence. First public appearance. A row of microphones salute the mouth of the family spokesman. Look how this mother's holding up well. Black apparel camouflage this unmothered fertility flat behind podiums as bouquets of cameras flashes stain the air. Metaphor for sobbing, metaphor for howling, metaphor for restrained grief, metaphor for newly baptized mother, for the ongoing revolution, metaphor for no language. This is no damn metaphor. Exhibit 7, Cotton Embroidery Threads. How when she heard the news, she sat up all night in a dark room, stitching his face into the brown cloth, red thread embroidering the shape, then unpicking each hour, the endless lift and poke of needle, then once completed the savage pull and tear, her needle picking, then snapping thread, fingers bleeding into the cloth, ruthless and unraveling. Exhibit 9, Warrior Chant, Bundang Babylon. Video trending and sharing on social media, no respect for your grief. The goats are bleating, bleat, bleat. Trolls on social media, bleat, bleat. Vile statements about dead son, no respect for your grief. The goats are bleating, bleat, bleat. Police give official statement, bleat, bleat. Meanwhile, the dead woman, man, clutches their throat, hands handcuffed behind backs, bullet holes in body. They skank the 1 foot skank, see their foot bottom dip and skip, skeleton foot, licking the ground like drum, a phantom shebeen in that earthly basement. Each feet in harmony to the Rastaman's chant, chanting bun, bun down Babylon, bun down Babylon. And the last exhibit I'll read you is Exhibit 10, Doorways. The background sound is the rhythmic slamming of doors, almost like an echo chamber, the voices chanting the following on loop. He slammed the door that shut this morning. He sat down in that car and shut the car door earlier. They slammed him to the floor, slammed the cell door on him, her. He ran through the train door just before it slammed this morning. He walked through the shop door. The door slammed shut and licked the wall. His mother heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Malika. Please welcome Nine McCartney.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good. So I chose to write about Article 10, which is the right to a fair trial. Everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent. Yeah, so it's the right to a fair trial. The reason I picked this topic was often, as a black immigrant from Jamaica who sort of looks the way that I look, you can imagine I identify with people that are ostracized or feel sort of as if they were kicked out of society, as if they don't belong. And I was spending a lot of time studying the darker bits of humanity, studying people like Ted Bundy or what's his name, Jeffrey Dahmer or Charles Manson. How many of you have heard of Charles Manson? Just raise of hands. Yeah. What do you know about Charles Manson for? What did he do? Anybody? Death cult. Charles Manson killed people, right? He killed a bunch of people. No, he did not. He didn't kill anybody. Charles Manson actually didn't commit any murders. But in the media, they said that he did. And they painted it big time as if Charles Manson was this killer that actually went out and did this stuff. And he had this cult that was a murder cult, that so on and so forth. Now, I'm not here to profess this guy's innocence, but I feel like I'm not a person that's in charge of the society that I live in. I don't pass laws, and I don't make decisions. In fact, somebody much higher up than me does that. And if you can be subject to not having a fair trial, then I'm also at risk. And it reminded me of the witch hunts. It reminded me of Emmett Till. It reminded me of the lynchings. And I'm not here to profess anybody's innocence whatsoever, but I am here to say that everyone deserves an equal and fair trial. So I spent a lot of time listening to Charles Manson's side of the story and what he had to say about what happened. And I wrote this poem with regards to that whole situation. And it's called Powwow with the Devil on C.A. Low Drive. And it goes. A tall man in a black suit materializes from the darkness. He joins me and a few others in a cold room, stepping lightly in the shallow pool of blood that coats the floor. In the center of the room, he rests a Bible and asks everyone to touch it and state name. He writes all the names down in a thick black leather book and then disappears. A couple hundred years later, I'm driving through downtown LA looking for a cigarette dipped in lysergic acid dithylamide, whilst the radio's playing Sweet Caroline and pointing sharp tongues at Charles Manson for marshalling the murder of a pregnant Sharon Tate, as well as a few other less acclaimed bodies. This is trial by media, and if I can find this cigarette, then I will make a very conscious member of the jury. Sometimes I think I look like him, Manson, ragged and ostracized, dreg and shag cloth to the perfume-bearing hypocrites out to clean. The prosecutor is my mirror, and the prosecutors have their backs turned. But we all still wade in the same blood. Manson spoke of a promised land on the hills of California. But when your freedom of speech is at the mercy of psychiatric evaluation, often you're considered crazy. Much like how, when you sit behind prison bars, you're considered wrong to the world and the judge. I found the cigarette, asked it for answers, then headed to Benedict Canyon. Powwow with the devil on Cielo Drive. So I parked my car not far from the police tape, and a tall man in a black suit gets inside and tells me to drive. At this point, the grass is liquid and the sky is dripping red. Okay. The streets are made of bone and flesh. The houses rest on graveyards. We burn heisted oil to my Cherie Amour, cruising top down on Rodeo Drive with a body in the trunk and money in the back seat. Ignorant, they mourn their anointed, waving pitchforks and torches at the blamed, because someone must take blame. And finally, in a dystopian first world fever dream, a man spends his life in jail after the children you left hungry find father in him and kill for food. If I don't have any rights, you don't have any rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Nine. Please welcome Glyn Maxwell.
In my poem, the last person in the world who isn't sure lives in a cottage, and she gets a kind of home invasion. Seems to me that what's been going from the world slowly from about the 1980s is that sense of the position where one doesn't know, one isn't sure. Everything that's analog, everything that's memory, everything that's on a scale, everything that's like, I kind of agree, but then again, everything that's like two minds, everything that poets do, everything that poets are stuck with doing. That's being very rapidly, more rapidly eroded, wiped from the world. And just when we didn't need that to be happening, the technology comes along that makes that incredibly easy to do. So now we're saddled with populist leaders. Populism is cowardly. The yes or no question is cowardly, and populist leaders exist and stay in power by the yes or no question, with us or against us. You for this or against it. Profit or loss. Every individual is profit or loss. So those people are in power, and I just think populism is cowardly because it shirks the complexity of life, the complexity of existence, and tries to boil it down to with us or against us, yes or no, right or wrong. So I'm anti, not pro, anti all of that. But I also don't entirely know. And I'm with the people who don't entirely know anything and know slightly less every year. So I guess this relates, in my poem here, it relates to everybody in the world, either the ayes or the noes, people who've made up their minds entirely, come for the last person who's a don't know. The last registered don't know. And this is what happens. She was the last don't know. Not that she knew nothing, she knew loads, and sat alone to weigh the cons and pros of everything that came, the way her folks had taught her, though in time they knew and she doesn't know. Not that she knows nothing, she knows loads. Went home with many books on her old barrow, the day the last of the libraries had a jumble sale and closed. but it didn't help her choose. Not now, on her porch at twilight, with the eyes and nose arriving helplessly in droves, demanding what they did from me and you about the news. Make no apology if you said no and I said I, or I said no and you said I. The wide world knows we knew when the time came, and we, on the count of 1, 2, 3, let all the wide world breathe with our knowing what to choose. So all the eyes could love us and forget us, while the nose could put us in the system there developing for those. But for the last don't know, there is nothing. There she stands at the floodlit door of her rented cottage, while her garden fills to the very edge of the rose beds, and there asking how it grows, her garden. Does it grow with silver bells and cockle shells? And oh, with pretty maids, how does the old thing go? They are asking. Both the eyes and nose are asking on tiptoes at all her cottage windows. Now the door was shut by the last of the don't knows. Why? The eyes know why, so do the nose, but you'll have to sign her name to it, or sorry, no one goes. So one by one the windows, don't make a sound, don't break it, have to give. The windows understand, and the side doors evidently stepped aside. So this is how they live, we softly say inside the hallway of the last of the don't knows. Hush, hush, is whispered by the eyes, and you go that way, we'll go this, is muttered by the nose. Now eyes and nose have found the way to work together. Round and round the kitchen and the snug they go for clues, for indications, tips and shits and giggles, stuff to use. She knows, she knows, she knows, is hissing down the hallway, for the eyes have it, as the saying goes, and the nose have it, as the saying, to be fair, also goes. And how about upstairs? Somebody thinks, and up they go in pairs, an I and no, a no and I, proceeding arm in arm, for peace is theirs, and on to the dark landing they go, they go, they only want to know, they only want to know for you and I, for I and no, they only want to serve the greater good that wants them to, and so there's nowhere they won't go, except for the attic room and the sky window, where sits alone the last of the don't knows, her face amid the stars. Why go any further now? There is nothing we don't know. An angel shines up there, the tearful eyes cry streaming down the stairs again. A howling monster dwells on high. The nose are howling as they flee the upstairs and the downstairs of the cottage of the last of the don't knows. Now she knows, and we know what she knows, for through our dreams forever now, she comes and goes. Thank you.
Glyn Maxwell, ladies and gentlemen, I've never felt so proud and empowered to be a don't know. It's going to be my next T-shirt. I might just abbreviate it, dunno. Please welcome Linton Quasi Johnson.
Good evening. I am very honored to be part of this poetry anthology, is it? I'm going to recite 3 poems because I'm told I'm allowed. And one from the 70s, one from the 80s, and one from the 90s. And I'll be keeping in tune with Malika's theme, which basically is about racist police practices as experienced by the black communities in this country, and our struggles for justice. So this is the first one. I wrote it when I was about 20, and to find my voice as a poet. And it's a poem of resistance called All We're Doing Is Defending, because as a youth growing up in this country, it was clear to my contemporaries, as it was to me, that the Metropolitan Police Force had declared war against the black youth of my generation. And it has been a protracted war of attrition, which is still being waged today. War, war. Me say, listen, oppressing man, hear what I say if you can. We have a grievous blow for blow. We will fight you in the streets with our hand. We have a plan. So listen, man, get ready to take some blows. Those days of the truncheon and those nights of melancholy locked in a cell, those hours of torture touching hell, those blows that caused my heart to swell were well numbered and are now at an end. All we're doing is defending, so get you ready for war. War. Freedom is a very fine thing. And all oppression can do is bring passion to the heights of eruption, and songs of fire we will sing. No, no, no run. You did sound your siren on his war now. War, war. The special patrol will fall like a wall forced down or a town turned to dust. Even though them think them bold, we know them cold like ice with fear, and we's fire. Choose your weapon them quick. All we need is buckles and bricks and sticks. We have fists, we have feet, we carry dynamite in with teeth. Send for the riot squad quick, cause we're running wild. We bitter like bile, blood will guide their way. And I say, all we're doing is defending. So get you ready for war, war. Freedom is a very fine thing. Now, that was written in 1973, and some people felt that what happened later on, the riots and the uprisings and all that particular poem was prophetic, but there's nothing prophetic about it. I mean, you didn't have to be gifted with, you didn't have to be prescient to know that sooner or later something was going to happen. 1981 was the most significant year in the history of the black people struggle in this country for racial equality and for social justice. That was the year of the New Cross fire, the New Cross massacre, where 13 young black children were murdered in an arson attack at 439 New Cross Road in southeast London. It was the year of the Black People's Day of Action, when in response to the arson attack and the campaign of lies and disinformation on the part of the police, the New Cross Massacre Action Committee mobilized 20,000 people, and we marched through London to Hyde Park to show that we had some power and we could mobilize that power if we had to. And it was also the year of the uprisings, the first major uprisings, first beginning in Brixton and then every other major inner city area in the country. This is a poem that records what happened in Brixton. It's called The Great Insurrection. It was in April 1981, down in the ghetto of Brixton, that the Babylon them caused such a friction that it bring about a great insurrection. And it spread all over the nation. It was truly an historical occasion. It was event of the year, and I wish I had been there when we run riot all over Brixton, when we mash up plenty police van, when we mash up the Wicked One plan, when we mash up the Swamp 81. For what? To make the ruler them understand that we not take no more of them action. And when me check out the ghetto grapevine, to find out all I could have find, every rebel just a revel in them story. Them a talk about the power and the glory. Them a talk about the burning and the looting. Them a talk about the smashing and the grabbing. Them a tell me about the vanquish and the victory. Them said the Babylon them went too far. So what? We had was for burn 2 car. And 1 and 2 innocent get mar. But what? No so it go sometime in a war in Star. No so it go sometime in a war. Them say we burn down the judge, we could have burned the landlord. We burn down the judge, we never burn the landlord. When we run riot all over Brixton. When we mash up plenty police van. When we mash up the wicked one plan. When we mash up the swampy thing. Them say we commandeer car and we gather ammunition. We build with barricade and the wicked catch afraid. We send out, we scout, figure find them whereabout. Then we farm up with posse and we make we raid. Well, now them run gang go plan counter action. But the plastic bullet and the water cannon will bring a blam blam. Will bring a blam. Scar man will bring a blam blam. And finally, this is a poem I contributed to the campaign that was being waged, and it's still being waged, a campaign for justice of the bereaved of those who had died in police custody or at the hands of the police. It's called License for Kill. It's just 2 friends, 2 workmates in a factory talking about black deaths in police custody. Sometimes I think my co-worker crazy. The way Christine would have gone jokey. Then the next time, no, a no nonsense stance. The way she wind down the place last Christmas dance. The way she love to talk about conspiracy. I'm going to have to sit this one out. Thank you. Sometimes I think my co-worker crazy. The way Christine would have gone jokey. Then the next time, no, a no nonsense stance. The way she wind down the place last Christmas dance. The way she love to talk about conspiracy. Me and Christine in the canteen talk about the death of black people in a custody. How not a cat make meow or no damn dog bark. How nobody high up in a society can offer explanation nor remedy. When Christine knit up her brow, like see a row, she a go row. Screw up her face, like see a trace, she a go trace. Here are now. You think I just MI5 and James Bond and police and soldier over North Island 1? When it come to black people, Winston, some police in England got license for kill. Well, Christine say, surprise me still, but hear me now. What you mean, Christine? I would tell you that. I must you one idiot. You can't prove that. I would tell me if you go say that. Christine kiss her teeth, then she cut me with her eye and she say, you want proof? You can't ask Clinton McCarthy about him asphyxiation. And you can't ask Joy Gordon about her suffocation. You can't ask Colin Roach if him really shoot himself. And you can't ask Vincent Graham if it's him stab himself. But you can ask the commissioner about the license for kill. Ask Sir Paul Condon about the license for kill. You can't ask the Douglas them about the new style baton. And you can't ask Tony Hassan about him death by neglect. You can't ask Marlon Downs if him have any regret. And you can't ask El Gamal about the mystery of him death. But you can ask Dame Barbara. Ask the DPP about the license for kill. You can't ask Ibrahim about the CS gas attack. You can't ask Mrs. Jarrett how she get her heart attack. You can't ask Oliver Price about the grip round him neck. And you can't ask Steve Boyce about him death by neglect. But you can ask the PCA about the license for kill. Ask the ACPO about the license for kill. You can ask Maggie Thatcher about the license for kill. And you can ask John Major about the license for kill. You can ask Michael Howard. You can ask Jack Straw about the rule of law. You can ask Tony Blair if he is aware or care about the license for kill that plenty police feel them got. Sometimes I think my co-worker crazy. The way Christine would have gone jokey. Then the next time now, a no nonsense stance. The way she wind down the place last Christmas dance. The way she love to talk about conspiracy.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along tonight and bearing witness to our poets, bearing witness to these essential subjects. The festival goes on across tomorrow and Sunday. There are events all day tomorrow and on Sunday. There'll be another reading tomorrow night and on Sunday night with a new group of poets with more newly commissioned work. A house musician, Jada Mystery, is going to play. But could I ask you all to give one more round of applause for our poets? Nine McCarthy, Imtiaz Dharker, Glyn Maxwell, Mona Arshi, Raymond Antrobus, Malika Booker, Linton Kwesi Johnson. Thank you very much.